Well, I think the next step here is to fabricate up these oil hoses for the oil cooler and get that taken care of. Well, this is an Aeroquip, what is that, 303 hose. So we got to fit up the ends onto this hose, cut it to length and fit the ends up on it to change out those old hoses and hopefully take some of the pressure off of that oil cooler. This is the hose that came off of the engine, came from the accessory case on the engine and ran over to the oil cooler. And you can see it's pretty stiff hose. Oh, it was putting a lot of pressure on that oil cooler. I think that was what was causing it to crack out. So I took it off to replace it. Once I got it off, I could see that right here there's some abrasion on it where it was rubbing on the engine mount. Now, I was looking on the Aeroquip website, and I found some instructions on there on how to repair that. So this is not, doesn't make it unairworthy. They actually have some stuff you can get to wrap around that. So that's just in the shell over the outside of the hose. It's not into the main body of the hose. Anyway, it's a pretty nice hose. It's just pretty stiff. So I got some new hose here. This is regular Aeroquip 303, I think it is. Yeah, 303-8, which is 8 is ½ inch. Well, that's a lot more flexible than this. Well, hopefully I can put that on there and stop the problems with the baffling around the oil cooler cracking out. So you make this hose up to fit, and this is the end that goes on there. I've already put one end on. I've got to cut this hose to length, but after getting it and thinking about it, I decided I'm going to get some fire sleeve to put on it. That goes over it and protects it from burning. And one part of this hose does go awful close to, or one hose here does go awful close to the muffler. So anyway, I went ahead and ordered some fire sleeve for it. So before I finish that hose up, I've got to put the fire sleeve over it because it won't fit over the ends here. But I'm going to go ahead and put another end on this. This piece will be cut to length and then make two hoses. You got a rubber liner, and then it has a wire mesh wrap around that, and then there's more rubber, and then there's a cloth woven cloth around the outside of it. You can cut it with a hacksaw with a fine-tooth blade, but they recommend wrapping it with masking tape or duct tape or something like that. Masking tape is what they recommend, so that it doesn't fray too bad when you cut it. And then you can cut it with a fiber disc cutter. You can cut it with a hacksaw, but it's better to cut it with a fiber disc cutter. Anyway, I took this, it had some sharp shards on it. I took it and put it on the disc sander and sanded it down so it's smooth. So there's two parts to this. There's this sleeve that goes on the outside, and then there's the fitting that goes on the inside. This happens to be a female fitting. You can get male fittings. You can get fittings that come out and go at 45-degree angle or 90-degree angle, things like that. But this goes on first. This is the goes on the outside. Well, I've got my soft jaws in my vise, and this is threaded two places. It's threaded here for this nipple to go into, that threads into it, and it's threaded on the inside here on the sleeve for the hose to go into. So you thread the hose in there like that, and I'll put a little bit of oil on that just to make it easier. I don't know whether you need it on this part or not, but those are left-hand threads in there, so you put that in there and then screw the hose into the nipple. You turn it to the opposite direction you're used to thread that in there. As it says, left-hand thread, pushing down on it. It's a fairly coarse thread, so it goes pretty easy. It bites in there, but now I can take that out, thread it in by hand, and it's almost all the way in there, but there's a collar where this is here. You want to thread that right up to that collar, and you got to remember to not lefty-loosey and righty-tighty, it's righty-tighty. Okay, now I've got that in there tight and it's right up to that collar. Well, now I'm going to put this back in my soft jaws again and put oil down in there in that hose and the threads, of course. I've got a line-up punch here, a tapered punch. Oil it up. I'll put that down in there first and kind of shape that hose, taper the inside of that hose so that it flares it out a little bit. Now they make special tools to go in these, and they actually have a shank that goes down all the way through this nipple, and it threads in, because you have to thread that in, you have to lock those threads in there. And I ordered a tool off of eBay. The guy had advertised for a 1/2 inch, but when I got it, it's for 3/4 inch instead. So they say to put the type of oil that you're going to use in there, whatever fluid you're going to use in there to lube that. I'm just using regular oil. This thing threads in. Well, of course, this coupling nut here spins freely on this shaft, so I just got a JIC plug and put in there, and now I can use that to turn that with, tighten that up in there and turn it, push pressure down on it and turn it. Oops, this is 7/8. I need a 13/16 wrench for this size. This is a number 8, which is a 1/2 inch. And we just thread that down in there. Now while that's threading in there, it's threading into this sleeve on the outside, and it's pushing down in that hose. You saw that tapered end on there, flaring that hose out on the end. Now there's a dimension to test these. I'll have to look it up and see for sure, but there's a collar on that, so we want to thread this end all the way down into where that collar goes, and it'll stop on top of this sleeve right here. Okay, now that's down there all the way, and once that's in there all the way, I can take this plug out of the end, and then this end will pivot freely on that, like that. Well, I'm going to do one more thing here with these. I've got that end in there on that end, and I've already put this end in. Now I'm going to take, I've got a JIC connector here, which happens to be 37 degrees, which is the same as the aircraft fittings. So I'm going to take that and put up that in there, and then make up a test device to pressure test this. I'll fix something up with a valve on there and a gauge, and then I can pressure test this hose before it's put into use. And I made up a little manifold here to do a pressure test on this hose now. Now this is not going to be the final event on this, the final pressure test or anything. This hose, I still have to cut this off and put the 2 ends on it for the other hoses, or to make up the 2 hoses. So this is kind of a dry run, but this will tell me how these fittings are right here that I just put on. So what I did was, of course, I went and got this JIC plug, which is a hydraulic fitting, still 37 degrees, which is the same as the aircraft. And then I got this one here that has a 1/4 inch pipe thread out of it, 1/4 inch male nipple out of it. And for all the junk that I got around here stored and everything, I couldn't find the right stuff to make this manifold, so I had to go to town and get it. And of course in town they didn't have any of the black steel pipe, the galvanized pipe. They were out of the T's, and so I wound up going with brass. So I've got a ball valve here, and then I had the pressure gauge, and I put a quick coupling on there. I can hook that into my air hose. So I'll go ahead and turn on the air. I've got about, looks like 60 pounds, which should be enough for this. So I'll turn this valve off and put in 60 pounds, and then I'll just slowly turn this. Let's see here. You can see, whoop, that's upside down, right side up. The whole thing's all kind of convoluted here. So anyway, I'll just slowly pressurize that. Guess it was already pressurized. Now that says 40 pounds. I don't hear any leaks, so I'll turn that off. And just to make sure that valve's not leaking, I'll disconnect the air from that, and we'll wait and see what happens. So that's about 39 pounds. It hadn't leaked off yet, so that's a good sign. Anyway, we'll let that leak off and see how that works. Been about an hour since I hooked that thing up, and needle hasn't moved one smidgen. So I'd say that's probably pretty good. I don't have anything else to do with that, so I'll just go ahead and let it sit there. It's not going to hurt anything. I'd say that's pretty good. Anyway, the test will be once I get the hoses made up, once I get the ends on them, once I get that cut off and the ends put on them, then we'll test it again. But that's the general idea. Those two ends look pretty good.